How to build brand authority for LLGs if not building entity assets? Should we have an ID page for them or follow the content mirroring method? Well, that's a good question, but typically what I recommend for brand authority is waiting until you have a GBP or something assigned to a GBP. Like in other words, have an LLG site assigned to a company, a client that has a GBP. Because you can build brand authority without a GBP, but it's much more difficult. And the Google Business Profile is an entity validator. That's why you go through a validation or a verification process. Because once you do that, it solidifies it as, you know, a local business entity in Google search algorithm, right? Does that make sense? And so, you know, you can establish brand authority or start to build brand authority without one, but it's much more difficult. And just to be clear, like I've talked about Who's IFA before on questions that you have asked here at Hump Day Hangouts, is I recommend using the LLG sites only as a sales tool initially, right? So you don't have to worry about building brand authority for all of them. I think you're getting ahead of yourself, over your skis, as they say, right? Because honestly, what I do is I just build the LLG sites in areas. I tell everybody to target low competition areas, but there are times when I build them in areas that aren't low competition areas, just because I know that there's a very good chance that I'm going to land a client in that area and I want to have something to point to. And so I don't really worry so much about building brand authority for the LLG brand itself, other than just building links to the overall LLG domain, my branded domain, which is done both at the root domain level as well as the subdomain level. Okay. But once you have a website in an area, so an LLG site, local lead generation site in a particular area that is ranking fairly well, right, for at least a portion of the keywords, a portion of the areas that you're targeting, that's all that is needed to use that now as a sales tool. You understand that's all that's needed. It doesn't have to be ranked 100%. It doesn't have to be generating a ton of leads. It's something that you can point to when you're pitching your services to a company in the area. And you can still monetize it. Like I've talked about this before, but LLG sites can be monetized either directly or indirectly. A direct monetization method would be renting it out, so like rank and rent, or pay per lead, or revenue share, or something like that. Or an indirect monetization method, which is to use it as a sales tool and then just assign any of the leads that are generated from that site to the company that you end up selling your SEO services to or your marketing services to in that area. And so I don't really care about building brand authority for the LLG brand in and of itself, other than just building links to it and building domain authority. And I don't mean Moz's domain authority, although that will go up too. I just mean overall backlink profile authority to the root domain and all of its subdomains. And then once we have a client in a particular area, depending on what the arrangement of that engagement is, I may just rebrand the LLG site for them, or there's an additional fee that goes into that, because then it's not my asset anymore. Or I will just assign any of the leads to them that come from that. But at that point, once I have a paying client for a particular area where I have an LLG site, then that's where I'll go in and I'll start doing things like content mirroring, right? Building out branded and supporting assets for that specific location, even if it doesn't have a GBP. And that's okay, you can do that. But I don't want to go through spending extra time, effort, resources, money, etc., on building all that stuff out until I've monetized it. Because what's the point, right? You could go through spending money, time, effort, resources, etc., on building out an LLG brand in a particular location, and then you never end up monetizing it. And so, you know, that's a waste of effort. Why not just wait until it's monetized? So the least amount of effort possible is what you should be doing up front, right? The minimum viable product, so to speak, for just enough to be able to point to it to improve your sales or your closing ratio, right? And then from there, once you have money coming in from selling marketing services to a company in the area where you had that site, then you can invest a little bit of resources into building out additional assets. And guess who's paying for it at that point? Your client, not you. That's why I don't recommend doing that until you have a paying client in a particular location. I don't do it. I don't spend time and money on building additional assets for LLG brands until I have a client in the area. And that's just because, again, otherwise you end up spending too much time and resources on stuff that may not end up getting monetized. So focus on the sales side of things. And all you need for that is the LLG site to be partially ranked for some of the search queries in some of the locations that are being targeted. That's it. Okay. Good question. Moving on.